Hi, welcome to Quilt Addicts Anonymous. I'm Stephanie Brennan. In this series, we are working through sewing a skirt with quilting fabric. In this segment, we are doing a simple A-line skirt with just some simple darts and a waistband. In this video, we are going to actually attach the lining of the skirt to the outside. Now, I do want to let you know, like with this part, really be patient. This is probably the trickiest part of the entire skirt, but I promise it's not bad. We will walk you through it. So if you haven't already, make sure you hop over to shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com, grab your pattern and follow along. All right, so for the video, we've been focusing on the outside of the skirt, but we also, pretty much everything that we've done on here, except for the waistband, we have also done on the lining. So you can see we have the darts already here and we have our French seams. We don't have a waistband. We're going to attach that right now. So the first thing we're gonna do is turn the outside of the skirt inside out, and we're gonna turn the waistband down. And we're doing this because we wanna see these raw edges up here. And that's what we're going to attach the lining to. All right, so to put the lining in the skirt, what you wanna do is flip the outside of your skirt inside out and flip the waistband down. So you can see here's the inside of the outside layer of the skirt, and we have the waistband facing down. So we have these raw edges sticking up. Now, we're gonna take the lining of the skirt and put it inside the outside, right sides together. I like to just pick a point that's easy to find, such as the darts. That's gonna be my starting point as I work my way around. I'm lining up the raw edges, and then I'm also lining up the leg of the dart. And since both of these fabrics are pretty lightweight, I just press them both towards the outside of the skirt and stick a pin in there. That's gonna keep it in place. Now, I'm gonna do the same thing to the other dart. Just line up that stitching line on both sides. Make sure they're both pointing to the outside. And pin it in place. Just for good measure, I'm gonna go ahead and put one in the center front too. All right, next, I'm going to pin the French seams together along the sides. Now there is going to be a little bit of finagling to do here just because the French seam is already finished, but that's okay. The French seams I do like to nest. So with the elastic in the back half of the skirt, that likes to point to the front. So I'm going to let that kind of fall to the front. And then I'm going to take the lining, I'm going to point that towards the back and go ahead and pin that in place. Now the back half of the skirt is where things are going to get tricky. The reason for that is because we already have the elastic inside the back waistband and not in the lining. So there's a lot of extra room here that we're going to need to pin around. But the best thing to do is very similar to actually when we were doing the French seams. Just kind of take the fabric and pull it smooth over the elastic. So you have a bunch of gathers over here and it's mostly smooth over here. And then we're going to line up our raw edges just like we've been doing, and we're going to pin it, making sure that we stay inside the seam allowance. That way, when we're ready to move on to the next section, we can smooth that out and kind of tuck these over to the side. And we're going to do the exact same thing when we're sewing it. We're just going to take it slow, take it a couple inches at a time, making sure to get every bit of it. So as you can see here, we're just kind of pinning it, making sure to stay within the seam allowance over here, not pinning the elastic rather. And then when we're ready to move on, just slide it over. Now I'm not usually a pinner myself, unless we're talking about, if we're talking about a really big piece at a time just to kind of keep it together. But in this case, you really want to put a lot of pins in because as you can see, there's a lot of gathers in here and those are going to stretch out. So just take your time and pin around the back of the waistband. Looks like I caught a little bit here. Sometimes it'll be easier to go at an angle or even pin it horizontally, just whatever works for you. All right, now that we have the entire waistband pinned in place, we're gonna go ahead and sew the lining to the skirt. Now, most sewing machines, you can take this part off of the throat so you can kind of maneuver a little bit better. So I went ahead and did that. Now, as you're sewing, again, just take your time, try to match this exact same sewing line from when you sewed the waistband on earlier. And just go slow, take your time. So I'm starting on the front, so everything is nice and flat. I'm going to match the darts and the side seams. Make sure not to get too carried away and sew through one of your pins. That's no bueno. We don't want that. Now, because of the nature of this, we are sewing part of that French seam down, but that's okay. If you need to help it along, go ahead and do that. All right, now that we're on the back of the skirt, we're going to do the exact same thing we did with pinning it. We're going to kind of pull the fabric back and just work a couple inches at a time. Make sure to not accidentally sew your elastic. So make sure your seam is accurate, so we can stay stretchy and do what we need it to do. Now, as you go on, you're going to see the gathers get really tight in here because it's harder when you're sewing it to pull the elastic through to the side that we've already done than what it was when we were just pinning it. So we're going to get as far as we can, and then we'll just kind of pull the elastic back up here and smooth this part out here, make that easier to sew. Try not to stretch the elastic as you're doing this, just pull the fabric smooth over the elastic. One thing you could do, which I ended up just doing this to make it a little bit easier, if you're having trouble pulling the elastic through the throat of your machine, backstitch a little bit where you are. Put a pin in there to mark where you were in your waistband, and go ahead and just take it off and pull the elastic through. It's going to make this second part a lot easier. And then just keep going, do the same thing. I did go back a little bit, so I'm overlapping those stitches. So I'm not creating a weak spot. Once you get back to the front, it's smooth sailing. All right, terrific. We've got the lining in. This is what it looks like. So by doing this, we've actually put the raw edges between the lining layer and the outer layer. So when you're looking at it like this, you get a nice, clean, professional finish. And same here, we've got the back part here. Took our time with it. The gathers match. There we go. Thank you so much for joining us. That was getting the lining into our A-line skirt. Make sure you go ahead and get your pattern over at shop.quiltaddictsanonymous.com. In our next video, we're going to hem the skirt and finish it up. All right, so happy quilting and happy garment sewing.